But there's a little bit left in it, so have it whilst it's warm.
We are live.
Good morning.
Good morning, everybody. Chris, show me your coffee pot. I like the look of that. It's a nice one. That's a kind of plunger one, of course.
Very attractive.
Very attractive. I like that. Yeah. I might like one of those, Lindsay.
You don't like coffee?
Yeah, but I'd like one out of that. That would be good. Pam, how are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. Yeah.
You seem you can see us clearly. You can see us through one eye clearly.
Yes, the problem at the moment is that my eyes aren't sort of synced, in that if I don't wear glasses, the eye that's been done is fine, but the other eye isn't, is blurred. So you just get this funny thing, or I wear glasses and that eye's all right and that one's not. So
maybe out of honour to Pam today, we're going to do the Bible study like this. Okay.
I have to say, Pam, I would find that so frustrating and just disorientating if my eyes weren't synced.
Yeah, I must try what my son-in-law's mum did, which was to take the lens out of the.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Another idea, isn't
That's
it?
a good idea.
Yeah. If you could do it without breaking the frames, that's a good idea.
Yes, I must try that.
Yeah.
Well, you could always go to an optician and get them to do that for you. Take the thing
Yeah,
out.
that's the point. Yeah.
You might accidentally poke yourself in the eye, though.
Yeah. And that's one of the biggies that I rub my eyes quite a lot generally.
You just don't touch.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Anyway.
Good. Chris, how's life going for you at the moment? Busy?
Pretty good. Pretty good. Yeah, work's picked up a little bit. Yeah, I'm working in Warwick today.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all good, thank you.
Okay, and Lindsay, how's life in front of the big commission going?
Stressful, but it's getting on. I'm getting all the words on now.
Right.
But I've just got one of them and I put it in and I can't decide. I'm very perfectionist. Oh, is that L quite right? I've had to write them in chalk because it's on the board so big. I can't write in pencil, it doesn't show up. So I've been doing with these Conte white things, but it is big. It's getting there, but I keep thinking it's not good enough, but I'll never be good enough.
Yeah. The perfectionist in my life.
Pardon?
Say again, Pam?
What about you, Andrew?
How am I? I'm doing okay, actually. I'm still a bit head spinny from the learning community on the weekend, which I found really, really encouraging. It was like, woohoo! A whole bunch of people who were kind of up for some new stuff. That was really good.
Yeah.
It was really encouraging. Really encouraging. And I had there was something called a community practice that I went to at Westwood Church with Kairos Connection on Tuesday, and that was great. That was a nice catch up with some old friends as well. So that was really good. And I'm here and I'm awake, and it's nice to do Bible study with you guys as well. Something I always look forward to. We're going to do Genesis 42 in a minute, but we're going to do this story so far with Auntie Pam.
Are you sitting comfortably?
Okay. Can you just remind us of where we've got to in the story, Pam?
Right, okay. Well, this is all about Joseph. It starts off with Jacob, who's Joseph's dad, and his other name is Israel. And he had 12 children. No, he had 13 children. He had 12 boys and 1 girl. Typical that we forget the girl. Diana, yeah. So Joseph is a favourite. And we did a lot on, having favourites and things. And he gets a special coat. So we can all sing the song, I think, now. And he also has some dreams in which he says various things are going to bow down to him. And he doesn't make himself very popular at all. So one day his brothers are off keeping the sheep. Joseph is sent to see if they're okay. The brothers see him coming and they're so fed up of him. First of all, they decide they're going to kill him. And but then they put him into a I want to say cesspit, but it's not a cesspit, is it? It's into a well sort of thing.
Yeah.
And they take his coat and they smear blood all on it, and so they decide not to kill him, but they sell him off to some passing merchants and go back to their dad and say he's been killed by animals. So he gets taken by these merchants and sold in Egypt. And he is so good as a servant that he's given responsibility for Potiphar's, that's the bloke who is his employer.
Yeah.
So given lots of responsibility by him. Potiphar's wife fancies him and tries to get him into bed. So and he resists, but she gets him into trouble anyway and says that he was after her. So he gets thrown in jail. While he's in jail, again, because he's a responsible sort of lad, he gets put in charge and looking after the rest of the inmates. And then the two of the inmates have dreams, and both of the dreams come true. And Joseph says, well, you know, when you get back to the Pharaoh, who's the sort of king of Egypt, then put in a good word for me, but they forget. So then, it's a long story so far, isn't it? So then the king of Egypt, the Pharaoh, has some dreams himself that nobody can interpret. And then the butler remembers that Joseph can interpret dreams. So Joseph goes and interprets the dreams, and it's all about there being a famine coming, but there will be 7 good years of crops first of all, and then 7 years of famine. And is that where we're up to? Oh, and charge. That's right. He's put in charge of putting lots of grain aside, ready for the times of famine. But all of this, particularly with the interpretations of the dreams, Joseph puts down to God rather than sort of saying, I'm doing all this.
Very good. It is a really full narrative, isn't it? There's lots of stuff that happens. Well, reading into this next chapter then, I wonder if you three could read different parts for us. I wonder if, Chris, you could read from, this is chapter 42, verses 1 through to 17. And Lindsay, if you could read from 18.
Hang on. It's just on the lap thingy. I've just.
Could you read from 18 to 25? And Lindsay, could you read from 26 to the end?
You really think we're going to get through it all?
Do you think not? I'll tell you what then. We'll just do those first 2 readingsy bits then. We'll just get to 25 and see if we have any time, okay?
Okay.
So Chris, you go from 1 to 17. And Pam, you go from 18 to 25 then, okay? Lindsay, could you perhaps just pray for us instead?
Yeah, Father God, thank you for this time together. Thank you that we have your word, and that it's in this that we find about you, the story, that often it's through narratives and story that we find the truths about you. And I ask that you would give us insight and we'd actually understand more. Amen.
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 Okay.
Joseph's brothers go to Egypt. When Jacob learned that there was grain in Egypt, he said to his sons, "Why do you just keep looking at each other?" He continued, "I have heard that there is grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy some for us, so that we may live and not die." Then 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain from Egypt, but Jacob did not send Benjamin, Joseph's brother, with the others, because he was afraid that harm might come to him. So Israel's sons were among those who went to buy grain, for there was famine in the land of Canaan also. Now Joseph was the governor of the land, the person who sold the grain to all its people. So when Joseph's brothers arrived, they bowed down to him with their faces to the ground. As soon as Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them, but he pretended to be a stranger and spoke harshly to them. "Where do you come from?" he asked. "From the land of Canaan," they replied, "to buy food." Although Joseph recognized his brothers, they did not recognize him. Then he remembered his dreams about them and said to them, "You are spies. You have come to see where our land is unprotected." "No, my lord," they answered. "Your servants have come to buy food. We are the sons of one man. Your servants are honest men, not spies." "No," he said to them, "you have come to see where our land is unprotected." But they replied, "Your servants were 12 brothers, the sons of one man who lives in the land of Canaan. The youngest is now with our father, and one is no more." Joseph said to them, "It is just as I told you, you are spies, and this is how you will be tested. As surely as Pharaoh lives, you will not leave this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of your number to get your brothers. The rest of you will be kept in prison, so that your words may be tested to see if you are telling the truth. If you are not, then surely as Pharaoh lives, you are spies." And he put them all in custody for 3 days.
And on the third day, Joseph said to them, "Do this and you will live, for I fear God. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers stay here in prison, while the rest of you go and take grain back to your starving households. But you must bring your youngest brother to me, so that your words may be verified and that you may not die." This they proceeded to do. They said to one another, "Surely we're being punished because of our brother. We saw how distressed he was when he pleaded with us for his life, but we would not listen. That's why this distress has come upon us." Reuben replied, Did I tell you not to sin against the boy? But you wouldn't listen. Now we must give an account for his blood." They did not realize that Joseph could understand them, since he was using an interpreter. He turned away from them and began to weep, but then came back and spoke to them again. He had Simeon taken from them and bound before their eyes. Joseph gave orders to fill their bags with grain, to put each man's silver back in his sack, and to give them provisions for their journey. After this was done for them, they loaded their grain on their donkeys and left.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay. So the action is hotting up now. We now have a scenario where the famine has started to bite. What are your initial thoughts of the first section there, where we're back with Jacob and his sons? What do you make of that first section there?
Why do you keep looking at each other? So they're basically all thinking, what we're going to do? Is that what they're thinking? What we're going to do?
What are we going to do? What are we going to do? They've
Is
reached
there
the
a cartoon or something with some crows on a thing saying, "What are we going to do? What are we going to do?" Or is it? I can't remember.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And it's interesting because these are grown men who presumably are responsible for the practicalities of the herds and any crops they grow, and they're just kind of at a loss. Jacob is clearly still in charge, isn't he? Now he's an older man, but this is kind of a little window into the patriarchy. You know, if you're still alive, you're kind of in charge in that kind of tribal, nomadic life. So even though there's a whole crowd of blokes, they don't move until Jacob speaks, I guess.
But they've got wives and children by this time, haven't they?
I think so. I think so, yes. I mean, later on you hear Reuben make reference to his own children, doesn't he? Yes. And it's kind of, it's a life or death situation. The famine is not just a kind of, ooh, things are a bit tight. It's like, we might die if we don't get some food. Any other questions or thoughts, guys?
I wonder how much time had passed before, because they'd obviously just come out of the 7 years of abundance. But unless you're, you know, preparing for famine, I guess, you know, supplies would run out quite quickly, wouldn't they?
I would have thought so. I mean, that's kind of the classic subsistence farming anyway, isn't it? It's where next year's crop has to come in. You don't keep a kind of like a barn full in reserve in case next year doesn't come in. Usually you're living off this year's food. So as soon as the famine hits, they could be thinking, we are in real trouble. You're right. Yeah. 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 So they go from verse 4, but Jacob did not send Joseph's brother Benjamin. So this is a little window into Jacob's wiring. He is still very twitchy over the loss of Joseph, isn't he?
And again, he's got a favourite.
He's overly protective of another one because it's the one from his favourite wife.
That's right, yes. Do you want to go into all of that then?
Yeah, talk about it. Tell us about it. What do you think?
I did the last one. You do this one.
I'm trying to remember. So he'd had sons with various people.
Yeah.
But his wife couldn't conceive.
That's right.
And so it was only later that by God's intervention, she was able to have children.
Is it Rachel?
Yes, yeah.
And so she bears Joseph and Benjamin.
Yeah.
Is there anybody else, or is it just those two?
I did look, yes, just
those two. So were the other boys from Leah then?
No. He had to marry Leah first.
Yes.
He
got tricked, didn't he?
Yeah, so he had to marry Leah first before he was allowed to marry Rachel. But and I can't remember why. He has, I've got it written down here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 children by Leah. But also he has children by Leah's servant, has 2 children by her, and has 2 children by Rachel's servant. Before in the end he has Joseph and Benjamin. Joseph and Benjamin by Rachel. So I wonder if there's lots of sort of rivalry going on.
They could be, couldn't they? Yeah.
Between, you know, who their mum was, and your mum wasn't legit, sort of thing.
Yeah, a friend of mine once did an entire survey of the Old Testament stories where there are more than one wife, or a wife and a concubine. It never goes well. It's always bad news. It never works. So the narrative simply lets you deduce, don't do this. It's a bad thing to do.
This is why when we say, it's interesting when we say we're people who trust in the Bible. I think it's making it very clear. When you say that, it's understanding what the Bible is. So the Bible is a lot of it's lots of different things. There's obviously doctrine in there, but there's also story. And what I love about it is God includes the story, which is imperfect. And I think that's what's really good about the Bible, that it's like it unfolds. So God speaks about it, but it just shows you very normal human beings who are still trying to follow God, but are actually getting into an absolute mess. And I know that, you know, obviously sometimes people could, I don't know whether we do, could say, oh, well, they have polygamy in the Bible.
It doesn't endorse it.
But it doesn't endorse polygamy ever. It's just that this is what the customs probably were from around. Yeah. But it causes huge problems. It
lets the narrative teach you polygamy is bad, or multiple partners doesn't work. That's what it teaches you. What do you make of Benjamin? Is this the first place where he plays a significant role? We don't know much about him, do we? Except that he's the youngest. Is it the case that the youngest often get away with stuff?
I would dispute that. I'm the youngest.
Well, you would dispute it if you were the youngest, wouldn't you?
I'm the youngest.
I'm a middle child.
Oh, they're always difficult.
Yeah.
Problem child.
What about you, Chris?
I'm a middle child.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, we're the ones with all the psychological problems, aren't we, Chris?
I don't receive that.
I don't receive that. I don't receive it either. I repent. But it's interesting. There's probably an exaggerated level of protection on Benjamin now, isn't there? Because there's no argument from the brothers. There's no kind of, oh, we want to take Benjamin. It's like, okay, we get the point. We'll go. He stays. You know, so they kind of do as their father says.
I'm sort of intrigued by why all the boys go. I mean, why not the whole family? Or why not just one?
I think just one could be answered practically, because there's lots to carry.
Right.
If they're going to collect stuff, then they need plenty of either horses or camels or donkeys or whatever to bring it all back. Well, one person couldn't do that. There is a good question to do with should they move to Egypt, but I don't know if they would feel whether they have permission to.
Yeah.
You know, because you're basically, if Egypt was the breadbasket of this region now, they could have been flooded with immigrants, couldn't they?
And that brings it late, doesn't it?
Well, we know that is unpopular in certain contexts, like in our own. You know, here in Kenilworth, I mean, just yesterday I was having a conversation with one of our church members about the asylum seekers who are at the local hotel and how local churches can get alongside and help. And to be honest, from what I was hearing, they're desperate for conversation, for some hospitality, for just a little bit of help, you know? So it really does chime into this. But there may be fear in Jacob's boys as to whether they should all go with their families, because they might get into trouble, you know? So just going to buy stuff and come out again might be the only option they think is safe, you know?
And I suppose that sort of chimes in with people who come over here to earn money and then send it back to families.
Exactly. And the people who come here and do that, they usually live on the breadline and send most of it back.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's something very sacrificial about this. Yeah.
Well, we had that a lot when our children were little. We lived, when you were a curate, we lived on Sydenham in Leamington, and we sent children to the local school, Sydenham Primary School. We felt it was right to do the local school. And that was a very big mix of, well, there was a lot of, obviously, people from Sikh backgrounds there, and there were
Portuguese.
a huge amount of Portuguese and Polish who did exactly that. They'd come across because they didn't have enough, there wasn't enough work, say, in Portugal, and they'd often work on the service stations.
Yeah.
I don't know, yeah, that sort of thing. And it would often live quite a lot into a house as well.
Yeah.
But they were very hard workers, like really
I was very impressed with them, really impressed with them, you know. So moving on from verse 6 onwards, Joseph is the governor. And then you get this whole interaction with his brothers. Any arising questions or thoughts on this? So he sees them. Yes, Chris?
Yeah, I have one question. I might have gone some way to kind of satisfying myself with an answer by reading my footnotes, but the fact that his brothers didn't recognize him, you know, and I know it was out of context, vastly out of context, and they might have even considered him dead.
Yeah.
And obviously the whole, you know, the honor that was on him with all the clothes and just everything, you know, it just wouldn't have fitted. But also it said in my footnotes that he was 17, obviously, when you know, they last saw him, and 21 years had gone by.
Yeah.
Now a cousin of mine I knew very well. We lived in the same town, we went to the same school, and I hadn't seen her for something like, I don't know, 15 years or something, and she didn't recognize me.
Really?
I mean, some of it's like bald head, glasses, a bit, you know, and everything, but she absolutely didn't recognize me. But I wondered, going back to my question, do you think God might have also prevented him being revealed at that time to his brothers?
I think it's probably a mixture of the natural that you've just described. I think there may be a parallel. You remember how Mary in the resurrection garden can't recognize Jesus? I think her vision of Jesus is clouded by grief, and Jesus might be slightly different. And so we've got various factors at play here. And one of them is to do with the story still needs to unfold, and Joseph needs to be in charge of his brothers now. So his anonymity is part of that. And I mean, another feature of this is Joseph is harsh and in charge, which is also going to make you put your head down. It's like, oh my gosh, you don't look the governor in the eyes. You know, there's a kind of, you're not kind of going to do a face-to-face with someone who's the boss if he's speaking harshly to you. So, and there will be Egyptian makeup or headdress, and he'll be, maybe he's tanned in a slightly different way because Egypt is a bit hotter. There's a range of different things. It's a great question, though, Chris.
And the interpreter as well, of course, even though he can understand them.
I know. I mean, everything indicates this is not your brother.
Oh, that's interesting that they were obviously different language.
Yeah.
Ah.
Which Joseph would have had to pick up when he was with Potiphar, presumably.
The thing that occurred to me was that I expected that there would be lots of people who were going there asking for handouts. And I think I was surprised that Joseph seems to be doing all the giving out himself rather than delegating it.
It may be that he just happened to be at this particular point of dispersal or at that moment. It's a bit like, how God coordinates these meetings. Like, Mary and Joseph bring Jesus to the temple and Simeon's there. There's an arrangement from God so that Simeon can see the Messiah. This is, the brothers travel from Canaan and Joseph happens to have popped in to check that the distribution's going well. And he sees them. And it's like, aha. It does say he remembers his dreams, doesn't it? Does it say that? When he saw them, does it say that? I can't remember.
When they bow to him, is it?
Oh, it might be when they bow, yeah. But it says that they're strangers he is a stranger to them, but he can see them. He recognizes them. And then you get into this kind of you are spies thing. What's going on? What's Joseph doing? Why is this the tack he takes, do you think?
I think he's trying to freak them out. I think he's playing with them, isn't he? He's playing with them.
Do you think he has a scheme from the beginning, or do you think he's just blurting it out? He's just cross. Is he just wanting to give them a hard time, or?
Yeah.
No, he says that he remembered his dreams about them. So he remembers them.
That's verse 9,
bowing down to them. Do you remember his dream? They were like, so is he trying to force that? He's trying to realise, well, I need to force that then, so that they'll actually, it's like him being over them, isn't it? Maybe his view was wrong. Perhaps he's interpreting it wrong, where he thinks he's going to be lord over them, but actually you'll find out in the end that's not the way that God was going to do it, but it was.
But later on, this is the thing, the story gradually unfolds. Because he understands what they're saying to each other, his heart is touched, isn't it? So early on, you just get sharp words, you are spies, and then you get this little window. He still says it, he still keeps the game going, but you know that something's going on inside of Joseph. It's a different narrative,
And I think this is another one of those things we were talking about earlier about, is God saying subterfuge and being like this the right thing?
Yeah. It's complicated, this, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you think about it, from a purely ethical point of view, should Joseph have gone, brothers, it's me, straight away? But he didn't. And it's like, well, was he nastily teaching them a lesson, or did he need to take them through some process? I don't know. It's an interesting one to explore.
Maybe he didn't trust them, you know, after everything that had gone on. And I know he obviously went through a lot of training and humbling and everything, but this was unfolding out in real time right before him right now, and straight away. And then of course he hears them speaking. He knows their tongue, and that breaks him even more, doesn't it?
It does.
You can imagine how all that's going on in his head, you know,
Yeah.
and suddenly confronted. What do I do? And earlier on in the last chapter, it says he decided to forget about his family.
Yes.
And then suddenly here they are. So I can't forget them anymore.
And so there's a kind of a rude interruption almost, isn't it? It's almost like a point of pain from the past is now right in front of it.
Yeah.
I do wonder as well, this accusation of them being spies, they must have had a number of people coming from other nations, because it said the famine was all over the place. So they must have had some procedure to work out who's kosher and who's not, who's legitimate and who's a bad egg, you know, and they may have had standard ways of sifting. And this might have been one of those tests they do. They might press people first saying, we don't know who you are. What's your credentials? And he asks these questions about them to elicit personal information. Because they start to fess up, don't they? They go, we're honest men. We're all from one father. They start to tell some details. And I'm just wondering if he's thinking, I need to find out if you really are honest men. You know, what are you going to say?
Yeah. And I find it really interesting that they do actually talk about Joseph. They say, and one is no more in verse 13. The youngest is now with our father, and one is no more.
Exactly.
Well, did they say that? What you know?
And they didn't have to say that, did they?
No.
That means that part of their story still includes a Joseph who died.
Yeah.
They haven't airbrushed him out.
Yeah.
They don't pretend it didn't happen. And they little do they know they're saying it to the very man.
Yeah.
You know?
I can remember being in a situation, if I've got time to share this, do shut me up if we need to crack on. But so many years ago, long before I had a van or anything like that, I was doing a landscaping job, and I hired this skip. I can still remember, it was a long time ago. It was a very, very tiny one, £55. This guy came and dropped it off. The couple were elderly. The man had a disabled scooter. He put it on the drive. It was difficult for them, but they could cope with it for a short period. I did the job. I off-hired the skip, and he just didn't come and collect it. And it went on and on and on. Every time I phoned, he wouldn't answer. And I went to his registered office, and it didn't exist. And it was unbelievable. I even tried to get the police involved. Another skip company was going to try and pay them to move it for me, and they wanted to nick the skip. And I was like, no. It just got ridiculous. Anyway, I found his yard in the end. I hired a van myself. I took all the waste out of the small skip in the back of my quite new Audi A4. Wow. Many trips to the tip. I cleaned the skip out better than it arrived. I got a neighbour from across the road with 2 planks, because it was only a mini skip. We pushed it and we got it into this van. I drove it all the way to his yard. I put a sign on it saying property of this person with a letter, and I forgave him. And I put a Christian leaflet in there. I took photographs. I put a newspaper on there with the day's date on for evidence that I'd returned this skip. Wow. Right outside his yard. I was petrified. There were dogs barking. It was horrible. I never heard from him again. And then 2 years later or so, I'm in Kenilworth. I'm walking down the street, and God spoke to me, and he said, how would you feel if you saw that man? And I said, I'd be really cross. I'd give him what for? And then within 5 seconds, I said, no, sorry, Lord, that's wrong. I forgive. No word of a lie. Within 2 seconds, I'm walking down the street by Sainsbury's.
Yeah.
In 2 seconds, his skip lorry at walking pace, the traffic was moving very slowly, came right past me.
Wow.
Right. And I was like, wow, Lord.
Wow.
You put something before me. You gave me an opportunity. Praise God. I reacted well in the end. And that story about Joseph there, when his brother suddenly he was, it just made me think of that. I hadn't thought about that story for years.
Wow.
Can I just say that's an impressive story?
I've still got the photos of it somewhere. I think, I might have chucked them away now, but yeah.
That's really interesting, Chris, and well done. Because the whole business of honourable dealings with people who have wronged you is a massive lesson out of all of this. And you don't know whether you've done it until you're confronted again, do you?
No, that's right. Yeah.
That was a really interesting test.
I paid for a skip. I paid for a van. All that. Anyway, you get the gist of it. We must move on.
Basically, you were out of pocket.
Yes.
Wow.
And not for yourself, for the couple.
Yeah, but I had a duty of care to my customer, and it was getting that. It was awful. They were phoning this guy, and he was being rude to them and everything. It was Anyway.
Well, at this point in the story, you seem to be doing slightly better than Joseph.
Well,
let's see.
That. He was incredible.
Let's see. It's difficult to know. I'm not 100% convinced where he's at with this whole story, because he's pretty wise. Maybe he knew quite quickly, I'm going to do this, this, and this with my brothers, and maybe he's just spinning them a story to get information out of them, to see what are they made of now, what kind of men are they now after 21 years has passed, So then you get this change, because he threatens them with prison, doesn't he, at first, all of them?
He puts them all in prison.
Yeah, so there's custody for 3 days.
Yeah.
And then it says, verse 18, on the third day, Joseph said to them, do this and you will live, for I fear God. First mention of God, I think, in this little exchange. And he says, if you're honest men, go back and get your younger brother. Is that right? And I'll keep one of you or something. Is that right? Yeah. And it's just to elicit, tell me your backstory. Be honest with me. Tell me your backstory. And it kind of does it compel them to be honest? Does he force them to be honest?
And it's interesting because he's put them in prison. All of them in prison for 3 days. And then on the third day, reading from verse 18, Joseph said to them, do this and you will live, for I fear God.
Yeah.
Where God's brought back in again, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And so would the brothers at this time be thinking, I've got this sort of thing about which God, which, sort of, would they be thinking that it's the Egyptian God?
Yeah.
Whereas Joseph is still with the one true God, I am. Just find it intriguing.
It's a great question. It also raises a question. Has he had a change of mind himself in the 3 days?
Yeah.
Where he'd harshly accused them of being spies and locked them all up, but now his own conscience has been touched by God, saying, I need to modify what I do with my brothers because I fear God.
And we have another parallel with Christ, haven't we, with 3 days?
Yeah, absolutely. And then it starts to say, it's the brothers almost like giving a confession, isn't it, to each other?
Yeah.
They then have this reflection, which is amazing, absolutely amazing. So verse 21 onwards, they said to one another, alas, we are paying the penalty for what we did to our brother. We saw his anguish when he pleaded with us, but we would not listen. I mean, that's extra information we hadn't had before.
Yeah.
That is why this anguish has come upon us. And then Reuben shares his bit. So you get this little window opening up. The brothers are convicted of their sin and they think what we did, this is a consequence. You know, what we did, God is now addressing back on us. And so they obviously have an understanding that God repays, that God judges, that consequence happens when you do wrong. You know, think this is a moral universe. If you do that, you know, something might happen to you as a result that God brings.
So do we think that today?
I mean, that's a great question. That's a great question. Do people live thinking there are no consequences or different consequences? People believe, I mean, people in a novel sense believe in karma, don't they? Do bad and bad will happen to you, or do good and I hope good happens to me.
I mean, I talk to people, it doesn't always get on to talking about Jesus, but they'll talk about, you know, belief in things. Well, I sort of just believe, they have this innate belief that if I just do good things, then somehow it will be okay, you know, and I try and live a good life. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing to do, because it would be awful, you know, if people don't live good lives, but it is a sort of karma, isn't it? But
and I think they're hoping, I mean, that's a natural hope, that if you do your best, positive outcomes flow from that. I think the older you get, the more you realize that the universe isn't quite wired like that, because bad things happen to good people too, and good things happen to bad people too. You know, it's not quite as straightforward as that.
well, Job, the book of Job is all about that, isn't it? If you
Exactly.
think about it, Job, is
Exactly.
all about the fact that this man did nothing wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you ever want to read Job, it's useful to look, because it's addressing that whole thing of karma, which I think prevails a lot of society, really.
Yeah.
And actually, bad things can happen to good people, and that there are things that happen that's nothing to do with because you've done something wrong.
And there's the other side of it, of things, that when things go wrong, God gets the blame.
Yes, how ironic. God rarely gets the praise when things go right.
Right.
But he often gets the blame when things go wrong.
Yeah. Or it's, what did I do wrong?
I
Yeah.
often think that if things go bad, I do sometimes think, what do I need to do? Is it, if I've done something wrong? I sometimes think that. I mean, sometimes perhaps, you know, I'm not saying you haven't, because sometimes there are consequences to our own actions.
There are indeed, yeah. In fact, verse 22, then Reuben answered them, did I not tell you not to wrong the boy, but you would not listen, so now there comes a reckoning for his blood. You know, he's seeing consequence. He's kind of defending himself a bit as well. He's saying, you lot have brought this on me and our family, because I didn't want to do this, you lot did it. So it's revealing a long-term angst that he's been carrying as well. He's resenting what they did. He's angry.
Because he was the eldest.
Yeah.
He was the one who probably felt like, I'm meant to protect.
Yeah.
You know, my responsibility. So he feels like he let his dad down. He didn't school his younger brothers properly. And he's like, you made me blow it. I couldn't sort this, you know. And then you get this wonderful little cameo where it's almost like a camera has just been eavesdropping on there. You know, Joseph's ears were open and he could hear everything. I mean, I don't know if you've ever been in that situation where you're speaking in a foreign context or in front of someone who you think doesn't speak English, and you're rabbiting away, and then they happen to go, I do know what you're saying. It's like, oops. You know, Joseph could hear everything. He could hear every single word. He turned away from them and wept. So his Egyptian makeup would have run a little.
And it's interesting that he is so emotional.
Yeah.
Big boys don't cry.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Particularly, I would think, people who are in charge of countries don't cry.
Well, this is a vulnerability in Joseph, though, isn't it? This is a sensitive bit. Looking at the clock, I'm aware that we've done 3/4 of an hour already. I think you gauged the amount of verses correctly, Pam. Well done. We'll have to finish this chapter next time. Any takeaways, though, from this story so far? Anything that you've learned, anything that stirs you or teaches you? I would say one thing off the top of my head.
There's
And
a
it-
lot to go still, isn't there?
Oh, there's tons, yeah. God is sovereign over every detail. You know, God coordinates the brothers coming when Joseph is there. God even works through Joseph's initial splurges about them being spies, and then God enables Joseph to be in the right place to hear what the brothers are going to confess. And presumably the Spirit of God is helping the brothers be honest. You know, there's something going on in the brothers now that is to do with God. You know, God is discipling the brothers.
I think there's also something about, I don't know why this has occurred to me, that there are a lot of family sort of breakups and things that go on. And here they're being given a chance, or Joseph's being given a chance to make things right.
Yeah.
And he doesn't immediately,
Yeah.
but he does in the end. And I think that's sort of a lesson to us as well, you know, sort of, if you see the chance coming to put things right, then have a go, basically.
Okay. I'll be honest with you, one tiny little end story. I remember meeting a family where there were two sisters who were in their 70s and they hadn't spoken for 45 years. And one of them was ill. And the more we talked and prayed about it, the more her illness seemed to be attached to bitterness to do with her sister that had happened 45 years ago. So you're dead right, Pam. You know, this story is to do with family reconciliation as well, isn't it? If you get the chance, sort it out, you know.
And it takes time. It takes time and effort and yeah, a lot of emotional stuff.
It's costly, it really is.
I think a lot of us have families. I've stuck in my own family. I don't want to say on online, but yeah, I think unforgiveness and doing things just have an effect on people.
Yeah. Okay, I think we need to finish and maybe pray. Chris, could you finish with a prayer for us, I wonder?
Yes, Lord, thank you for this time this morning. Thank you, your word is rich, and I thank you, you've always got a word in season for any of us when we read your Bible. I pray that this fruit will come out of this session today. Pray for everybody listening, watching it in the future. Everybody would have a blessed day as we seek to go on with you, Lord.
Amen. Okay. Thank you so much. We will finish that chapter next time, so we can say goodbye for now, if that's okay. So
Bye.
see you next time. Thank you very much for all your contributions as well. Really, really